A few weeks ago, we made a video reviewing the 90s puppet TV series Brats of the Lost Nebula, a show about 5 orphans lost in space trying to find and save their families. Now, we have creator of the show, Dan Clark, here with us for an exclusive interview. Thanks for coming in today, Dan. Do you think you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and some of the projects you've worked on since Brats of the Lost Nebula?
I did Ninja Turtles for Fox Kids. I did Yo Gabba Gabba with the second season. We did a series of shorts that we were really excited about called Team Smithereen, which were kind of puppet stunt, the pitch was Jackass for 6-year-olds. We did a show called Food Truckers with Fremantle Media. We're doing a show right now called Friend Space, which is a adventure comedy about 3 kids who have been selected by a sentient spaceship to travel into deep space, locate alien worlds, find alien children on alien worlds, come up with a plan to communicate with alien children, and then befriend them. And then once they become friends, they post it, of course. And the making friends with alien kids is really complex because some kids are made of gas, some kids communicate with music, some kids are subatomic, some kids are the size of mountains. We have one planet of influencers. It's an entire alien world of online influencers. Every single citizen has an enormous following and licensing deals and promotional deals. And they just don't even know how to hang out in real time. So that episode is not so much about speaking to exotic alien creatures, but speaking to exotic alien creatures that we can all relate to because, so that's the idea. That's what I'm doing.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the inception of Brats of the Lost Nebula? Was Jim Henson trying to try out action cartoons to compete with other shows, or did you pitch it to them first? How exactly did the idea come about?
I had an overall deal, a housekeeping deal at the Jim Henson Company. I had done a pilot for Fox Comedy Lab, and it was puppets. And I had done a collaboration with the Kyoto brothers, who are the Killer Clowns from Outer Space guys, and that was puppets. And Henson saw our stuff, and we had some meetings, and I developed a show that was originally created by Kirk Thatcher over at Henson, but I redeveloped it and took it out with Henson, and we pitched it, and we ended up with a development deal at CBS. So I entered into an overall deal with Henson, and I had just a slate of shows I wanted to do. And one of them was Brats of the Lost Nebula. I'd been going downtown to Little Tokyo a lot. And there was this great bookstore then called Nippon Books. And Nippon Books had these really cool model books. They were like anime characters, but they were resin kit books, and they were these beautiful painted anime characters in action. And they looked badass and elegant. And I love them. And I was also really into, it was pre-Gorillas. So I was digging Tank Girl because I liked the gritty messiness of it, And I liked the kind of post-apocalyptic feel of jerry-rigged technology. So all those little things were bouncing around in my head. This idea of 3-dimensional anime characters and this Tank Girl aesthetic. And I grew up watching old episodes of a series by Jerry Anderson called Stingray and Thunderbirds, and I love those. And I stumbled on this thing called, I can't remember what it's called. It's called X-Star or Star X or something like that. It was a Japanese Japanese puppet adventure show, and it was a group of kids. And they were rod puppets. It was a group of kids in a spaceship going around having adventures, and they had a robot. And it sucked. It was a horrible show. But it was so ambitious and so crazy that they did it. And they were clearly ripping off or inspired by Thunderbirds and Stingray and Jerry Anderson's work in England. And I was so impressed. And I went and showed Brian Henson all this stuff. I said, look at this book, and look at these anime figures in 3D, and look at this horrible Japanese show, and look at this and this, and look at this Tank Girl stuff. And I was like, this is a show, man. And at the time, Henson was really into spreading their wings and experimenting. You know, Jim Henson had passed away just a couple years earlier when I first started working with Henson, and they were looking to do new and interesting things, and they were really generous with me and really supportive, and we started developing Brats of the Lost Nebula.
Yeah, so I want to know, since this might be like the only time you've ever been able to talk about it really, if you are able to tell us of what you had planned about where the show might have ended up with the characters, anything that you can remember, or the ending, anything.
You know what, you had written me earlier and told me you were going to ask me that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I wonder if I have any files in my computer. And I looked, and I don't have anything. And I'm sure they're in some dead, weird, probably like one of those candy-colored Macs from like the late 90s in a somewhere in the world, in some file that no one could open. But I can tell you that here's what I remember. I was really big on the idea from the very beginning that Hexter Vigar is a brat, that Hexter Vigar is an orphan, and Hexter Vigar has been violated by the hosts, and that Hexter Vigar is as lost as the kids. And the reason we track his character and the reason we give his character a little arc is because he's one of the team. He just doesn't know it. So I always thought of Hexter Vigar as a brat of the Lost Nebula, and I wanted to continue to track his character really closely. I wanted to revisit Tranoid culture because I had this idea as a storyline for Ryle that when he finds out that the Tranoids sold him out to protect their planet, he defends their choice because he's a good Tranoid. But then the Tranoids make the same choice again, and this time he can't defend it. And Ryle's not really very tough. He thinks he's tough because he's from a tough culture, but he's actually kind of a wiener. And I wanted to give him an arc where he actually turned into a legit hero and had to make really hard decisions. And he has to throw down against his own Tranoid council. We had this idea that we were going to do another group of brats.
Oh no.
And they were going to be more Lord of the Flies, more tribal, more anarchistic. They were going to be like Oliver Twist. They were thieves and they were bad, and they were the bad brats. And we waffled back and forth because on paper it looked like a Saban show. You know, we were always like, and I was doing Saban shows at the time, and they were very different. They're really simplistic, and but I like the idea of having bad brats, and so we had this notion that we would do these evil bad brats. We were never going to rehabilitate Vigar. Vigar was always going to be bad, but Vigar was going to be a mixed bag. He was going to do good over the course of the show, the second season, but he wasn't always going to choose darkness, but usually he was going to choose darkness. We were going to do flashbacks of all the kids' lives on their planets. I remember that. We weren't going to let Tripoli and Zadam find their parents, not in the second season.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not real life. You don't find your parents.
Yeah, but it's like towards the end, would they? That's
no. Maybe third season. If we knew we didn't have it, if we knew we only had 2 seasons, we might do it. Yeah. We gave Duncan his grandfather, and Duncan's grandfather was going to be a player, and he was going to be a mechanic on Captain Malusha's ship, the Alliance ship. Malusha's that thing that floats around in that device. It talks like this. And we were gonna stitch Grandpa into the show in a meaningful way. Yeah, but Zadam and Tripoli don't get their parents. That was the plan. Yeah.
But by the end of the show, maybe, or were their parents, just...
I personally don't think that. I mean, Ryle's a fake runaway, which is a real thing. When I was a teenager, I hitchhiked around the country, and I hung out with all these homeless kids. But I wasn't really homeless. I wasn't kicked out of my house. My parents weren't drug addicts. I didn't have to be on the streets. I chose it because I was just one of those kids that I wanted a lot of adventure in my life. So I was Ryle. And my group of friends, I mean, when we made the show, we were the Brats of the Lost Nebula. I made the show with Don Asher, who was the producer for our company. At the time, our company was Wandering Monkey Entertainment. And the two major designers on the show were Nathan Cabrera, who's a fine arts artist and does a lot of brand development art today. And he designed the look of the show, really. And Dave Pressler was one of the key designers on the show. And Dave's gone on to create his own TV shows, and he's over at Nickelodeon now. And we lived like the Brats of the Lost Nebula. We were like little pirates, you know? So the whole show is kind of like therapy for us, because we were those guys. We did live like that, you know? We wanted to explore the hosts, and the plan, absolutely, but we had no answer for it, was the hosts are victims too. You know? Everyone's a victim, and everyone's good in some way, shape, or form. But not everyone's 100% good. And so we were going to explore the hosts, and we had this idea about these ethereal creatures who were more like fallen angels. And so we were going to get into this kind of like fallen, ethereal, angel-y guys who have turned completely malevolent. And then we were going to figure out why they're bad. And then we were going to wonder what was the next step. And it was this idea that you're constantly going up the ladder of evil, you know? So you have Vigar, and then you have the hosts, and then what's on top of that?
What about Lavana? Did you have plans at all for her to eventually be reunited with her family, or was she like Zadam and Tripley, were they just destined to be orphans from then on?
We were really interested in the evolving affection between Zadam and Lavana. I've seen fan art for the show, and people draw Zadam and Lavana as boyfriend-girlfriend. And then poor Ryle is like out of luck. I don't know what we're gonna do with Lavana's parents. I don't remember. I love that character. That was like my favorite character in the show, Lavana.
So a lot of TV series try to make things relatable to its audience. Even when you have these big sci-fi stories, they tend to often tell these, you know, morals that are more relatable to the audience, especially for kids, you know, their metaphor. What inspired you to take this very serious approach? Because even though they're not necessarily relatable to kids, I think, you know, they resonate with them still.
We just wrote the show the way we wanted to, you know, and we pitched it as a serial, and no one tried to stop us. You know, in your review essay, Meditation on Brats, whatever it's called, the thing that I watched, that I was very impressed by.
Thank you.
I liked the writing. I thought it was very well done, and the editing was good. It's great. And I agreed with a lot of it, and I agreed that the first 3 episodes sucked. And they sucked because we didn't know how to make the show yet. And we were just getting warmed up. And it was a big show. It was complex. And I can see us struggling. The show was on Hulu like 7 years ago or something. And a friend of mine came over to the house, and we opened a bottle of wine, and we just hopped around. We didn't watch the whole series, but we popped around in it. And I remember when we were looking at episodes 1, 2, and 3, all my cringes. Oh God, I was horrified. But then I get into the show, and I get into later episodes, and I'm happy. Until you get to the last episode, which we rushed.
I was curious about that one, because
so
like it had all of the ideas were great.
But it's like
yeah, it was very like excuse the criticism, but it was very like just fast, like all at once. And
that should have been 2 episodes. Yeah, the second to last episode should have been Vigar arriving on the planetoid, and then the next episode we pick it up and Vigar's on the planetoid, and we tell that story for full 20 minutes. And then, you know, I remember one thing I remember about Brats of Lost Nebula is a bottle show. So it's a break on the production. And you're always trying to figure out a way to reuse shots. Like a character has a dream, and then then you do a bunch of flashbacks. And as you do the flashbacks, you cut back to the characters like, oh, I guess that's true. And then you do another flashback, and we did that with...
It was one of the later episodes where Zadam was seeing...
Zadam. We did Zadam. Zadam had the flashbacks. It's total... Yeah, that was what's money-saving episode. I hated that episode.
See, I actually really love that episode. I usually hate
that. What?
I usually hate those flashback type episodes because of that, but like the way you tied in the theme was just, and then having him come back to his sister at the end and do the broadcast, like I was like, ow, right in the feels. That was such a good.
Oh, that was how we got. That was the get out of jail free ticket. Making the ending strong made it worth doing for me because I was so mad about that episode. We were told to do a bottle show. I hated a bottle show. I thrashed around and complained constantly, and I ignored it and pretended it didn't exist. And then finally we had to make it, and that was my way of getting out of jail on that. Yeah, that ending was good, wasn't it? It was a really strong ending. Oh yeah, I love that one. That was top 2 for me. I think the Tripoli episode will always be my favorite, but that one was definitely. That was where that was the episode. Adam's thing was that was when him and Lavana shared feelings. The ending is he takes Tripoli's microphone and she's asleep, and he calls for the parents. He takes over duties, but he doesn't just say, "I'm looking for you." He says, "Mom, Dad, I met a girl." Oh yeah. And it was the "I met a girl" thing that I thought just opened up this whole other world for storytelling we never got to.
Okay, so you kind of went into this before a little bit, but that characters were inspired by, your friends and yourself. I don't think you mentioned, because you mentioned the email, the worm that Vigar had was also.
Zill.
Yeah,
Zill's based on someone. I can't tell you who it is because they'll be insulted and sad. So that's what I was curious about. I was like, was it throwing shade at someone for being kind of parasitic, or? Yes, and also the temperament and sense of humor, and the clingy affection giving, even the language, like even some of the jokes came literally out of the mouth of the person that we worked with on the film. And I can't tell you who it is because it would make them sad. One of my favorite moments, I've said this before, I'll be saying it till the end of time, I love the music box scene where Tripoli drops it, and it seems to symbolize, her childhood shattering, but still having that one remnant of it that she considers useless to her. We've talked about your inspirations for the show in general, but that moment specifically, like what motivated that? Because I was pretty steady on the train at that point since the Lavana episode, but as soon as I saw that moment, I was like, oh wow, this is something special. What inspired? I love it when, I've always loved it since I was a little kid. I love movies and TV shows and books where kids take action. And I think that's cool. That was so aspirational for me when kids could cock it, lock it, and rock it, and they got tough. It was a good example of what you could do with puppets. Oh yeah. Puppets are best. She does very little in that. The puppeteering is very small, and puppets. I think Dark Crystal, the new Dark Crystal. I think that's a great example too. What people do with puppets is they project their own. A puppet that just stops moving and just stands there. You have context of the story, right? So you know where we are in the story, and you know how the puppet should probably feel, but the puppet's not doing anything. It's just this object, and you look at it and you see performance in it, and you project feeling onto it, and nothing's happening. There's a person with a doll, and they're holding it up like this, and you get all this, you read so much on that puppet's face. And that's the magic of this. And I think that scene for me personally, as a person that likes working in puppetry, that scene for me was really strong because she doesn't do anything. She just stands there.
Yeah, so I guess I could send, you kind of answered this for things that you didn't get to do in the show yet, but was there anything maybe in season 1 that you'd planned that was just flat out rejected, or it was too serious or anything?
There were probably some things in the show that we couldn't do technically in terms of budget and schedule. I'm sure that happened. I thought the hosts out of all, and just in terms of practical special effects, the hosts were the worst. The actual hosts in Vigar's Magic Mirrors, I think you called it, which I like. We were asked to put more comedy in sometimes. I know that we were encouraged to be more funny more often. I can imagine that might be hard in some of the more stark episodes, especially. We tried to just this episode is funny and this episode is less funny, and then, or this episode is mostly funny and there's something goofy in the middle.
I think you guys found the best balance in the episode where Duncan gets taken over by that parasite. And I guess thematically it didn't have anything like super serious, but the plot was serious, and yet you had all these funny gags, like Tripley trying to like get her dolly back from Duncan, and then the whole Mr. Poopy Butt shtick that started off as like the kids being stupid, but then the villain at the end, he's like, farewell, Poopy Butts, and like, you know, teleported out of there. That was
Dr. Fabu was puppeteered and performed by Bill Beretta, who is a genius puppeteer and a great actor. Like, he is a great actor, and he's an adult that's had enough complex life experiences to be funny on a lot of levels. Not all puppeteers have. And he was also head puppeteer on the show, and he performed Duncan as well.
oh nice.
And what he brought to Duncan was he brought this kindness and this chill. Duncan's just so chill and nice. And I was like, we have to make Duncan bad. Like, Duncan has to be bad at some point. What is Duncan? Where's his complexity? What is his issue? And we couldn't come up with anything, so we just made him sick. And once he got sick, he could be mean and scary. And he was big and menacing. And that scene where he's like raging at his friends, and he's physically imposing, and then later he's sick and he's ugh. I remember all that. I remember being thrilled when we were doing it, because it was like, Duncan's scary and horrible. Yeah, that was a big Bill Beretta episode, because he's Duncan and he's Dr. Fabu.
As the series progressed, we saw more and more aliens off planet. Were there any particular alien designs or ideas that you had for season 2 or onward?
Well, you know what? We reused a lot of puppets. So from other Henson projects. So, for example, the 2 Greys who are hanging in the dungeon in Vigar's creature ship are from, I don't know, they're from something else.
I thought they looked familiar.
They were in the creature shop. I went into the creature shop and I climbed a ladder, and there were these big dusty boxes up in the rafters, and I started just digging for creatures and puppets. So the Acceptors, who are the ones that relish dying a violent death, and they have a lot of musical numbers and stuff. The Acceptors are turtle puppets, I think. Oh, the Acceptors are from dinosaurs. And Captain Malusha, actually, we made special for the show. But the little creature that hovers in the thing that Captain Malusha speaks to with one eye, he's from an old Henson show. We had there was, I don't remember what it was called. Jim Henson Hour. There was a show called the Jim Henson Hour. They generated a lot of interesting latex and foam characters. And we went through all the latex foam characters from that show, all the hand puppets from dinosaurs, and we pulled as much as we could, and then we redesigned and reconstructed. So, yeah, I wanted to do all new designs. If I had a second season, I wanted to do all new designs. Yeah.
We talked about, the show being canceled because of Warner Brothers and things that happened with that. But did this cancellation come as a surprise to you?
No.
No.
The week we were canceled, we were picked as one of the top 10 shows by TV Guide.
Oh, we saw that too, yeah.
And it was ironic for us. But yeah, no, they could, I wasn't surprised. I smelled it. I'm a ratings tracker. So I was tracking the ratings, and I knew our ratings were terrible.
Oh.
And we were like the lead into something very precious. Like, I don't know what it was. I don't know exactly. This could be wrong, but we were like the lead into Pinky and the Brain, or something like that. And so we're like poison for Pinky and the Brain. So they had to kill us, But I was gratified that it did better in Canada. I did a panel in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival, and the kid that introduced me said, creator of Brats of the Lost Nebula, which is not how I normally get introduced. And I got this big hand. And I was shocked. I was like, oh. And then after the panel, nobody talked to me about the panel. Everyone talked to me about Brats. I was like, oh, good, okay. So Canada.
So how does it feel to finally have the entire show released on Roku after 21 years? Has there been new people finding the show that you've reached out to? I know you found our video pretty soon after it went up.
I didn't know anything about it.
Oh.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Someone I work with sent me your video.
Oh.
And I didn't know anything about it being on Roku, and it was on Hulu a few years ago. And I don't know if Henson ever released it as DVD, but I've never,
No.
it was a million miles from my mind. I wasn't thinking about it.
Well, it was a great show. Like I said in the review, it was, I think my exact words were, it was one of the best things I had seen this year.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And
Thanks, you guys. You guys do a great job, and I really enjoy what you're doing too.
Thank you.
This video was edited down a little bit to make it a bit more timely, but for those of you super fans out there, we are putting a link to the full unedited version down below, so please do check it out.
If the sky